lot of questions about whether we're actually in a better or worse place than we were before the first missiles started flying.
I think it's here. There are sort of two clear losers politically, and one is President Trump himself. There aren't good answers to those questions. Two sources close to the White House confirmed to me that all of President Trump's advisors, the closest people to him, had turned against this war. They had all were pushing him to just end it at any cost because it's been so disastrous politically. And then I had a diplomat in the region talk about another person I think who's a loser in this politically, and that's Bibi Netanyahu. This person from the region said, I think most people have turned against the war for domestic political reasons. They're referring to countries, I'll say, in the Gulf, and the majority are frustrated with Bibi Netanyahu. So it's an extraordinary outcome. We were just talking about it before we started, how just imagining that this war would end this way based on what the president promised on February 27th. I think there's no question Iran is coming out stronger. And so it's just startling. And I was going to read, we've had so much great coverage this morning, you don't need it, but I had gone, word for word. I wrote a story with Julia Jester about this a few weeks ago. Nothing's changed. If you look at what the president said on February 28th, the 6 goals he outlined: destroy their missiles, not achieved; ensure the regime's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region, not achieved; annihilate their navy, maybe the big surface ships, but not the speed ships, so partially; raise their missile industry to the ground, achieved in the short term, but Iran is now going to have billions of dollars to rebuild all those missiles, and then ensure Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. We just don't know. We don't have any words for this agreement. Just the last thing, he said this at the end of the speech, but again, and I just feel for the people of Iran, to the great, proud people of Iran, take over your government. And he also said help is on the way.
And help was not on the way. And in fact, hardliners are now empowered there in Tehran. Also, here in the United States, we've exhausted more of our military supplies and prices are up. And they're going to, even if this indeed is the end of the war, and at least we'll see, prices are going to stay up for a while. Americans have had to pay more at the pump and for other goods for months now, and certainly a lot of political damage for Republicans. But I think there's also this sense of just how fragile this even is. It's really not even a peace deal. It's more of an extension of a ceasefire. And the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open. But as noted, there are real key differences here, including that just on the Strait, Iran is saying after 60 days, we're going to start taking some sort of fees again, which could provoke some sort of conflict. But they've also proven at any point they can just close it.
I want to start by saying I'm glad that peace is here, and I hope that it lasts. I hope that this can be sustained, because it is the only way out of a terrible, stupid war that we never should have been involved in the first place. So that aside, Donald Trump is doing this out of political desperation, because across the country, people weren't exactly clamoring for war with Iran. They weren't saying, oh, let's go do that. They were complaining about prices already. And then you look at the gas spikes around the country, and this is just a moment of political desperation where the headwinds have really sunk in, and Trump knows he needs some exit. He needs to try to save face somehow. And, if the war ends, save face, do it. Let's just move on from this, because it was a total mistake.
John Meacham, I'm curious where this fits for you in U.S. Military adventures. We have Bob Kagan saying it may go down as one of the great losses, strategic losses in U.S. history. But it seems to me if future presidents are watching this program right now, and if they do not understand that you can win a war militarily and lose it politically, they should just stay home and speak to Kiwanis clubs and Rotary clubs and lead governing to people who actually read history, because that was the lesson of Korea. That was the lesson of Vietnam. That was the lesson of Iraq. That was the lesson of Afghanistan. And now, regardless of what the president wants to say or spin, it's the lesson of Iran. As Elise and Jonathan said, all of the president's people, all the president's men and women had turned against this war. They were desperate to get out because their military objectives may have been reached, but none of their political objectives were.
Generationally, the question here is the unknown, the late Donald Rumsfeld, right? The known unknown. is to what extent has this military action actually delayed, prevented, or has it done nothing at all to Iran's attempt to achieve the ultimate weapon of mass destruction? And since 1945, 1946, Bernard Baruch gave a speech saying that we now face a choice between the quick and the dead. And nuclear proliferation is the central question of the last 80 years. It's kind of remarkable, if you think about it, that the nuclear club is not larger. And I believe, I think you believe, that preventing regimes from receiving the weapon, from developing the weapon, and given the destructive capacities of it, and the unknown implications of the deployment. No one's deployed an atomic weapon, a nuclear weapon, since 1945. So we just don't know what happens. David knows more about this than I do. What happens if, in fact, that, what they call in dork circles, the nuclear taboo, right? The nuclear taboo has been in place since 5 minutes after President Truman gave the orders in 1945. When that taboo is broken, we don't know what happens next. Here's the central question. All I really want to know, I mean, the strait and the economic effects, all of that, that's all plausible and understandable. You know, we can recognize the problem, we can address it. But we did this, I say we, because it's still a we, to prevent a nuclear weapon from going to a regime that should not have one. And we simply don't know, sitting here, to what extent that very specific goal has been achieved. And until we know that, I don't think we can judge the success or failure of the operation.
And Kathy, that is so dead on right. It's almost as if the man who was just speaking won a Pulitzer Prize. And no, I'm not talking about Pablo Torre and his podcast. I'm talking about Jon Meacham, because he's really right. Kathy, if you look at the grand sweep of history, this president, this deal, this president's war with Iran is not going to be judged on tolls coming in and out of the Strait over the next few years. It's not going to be judged on what sort of missile capability the Iranians continue to have. Of course it will at war colleges and other important places where these things need to be studied. Or even regime change, it is going to be judged solely on whether it stopped Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And I will say the president has underlined that time and time again. There cannot be a nuclear Iran. There cannot be a nuclear Iran. Well, this morning, reading reports where he said, well, I'm not really in a hurry to go and to get the nuclear material, to get the dust. We'll see how that goes. It sounds a bit general to me, but do you agree with John that at the end of the day, in the grand sweep of history, whether this war stopped Iran from gaining nuclear weapons or not will ultimately be how it will be measured?
Look, I think we might even take it one step further, Joe, and look not just at Iran, but whether this war in some way contributes to making the world a less safe place, because it ushers in a period of nuclear proliferation around the world. I think America has done such damage to its standing as a provider of security for countries around the world. I mean, just if you were sitting in Dubai or Abu Dhabi today, you would have serious questions about whether you could rely on the United States long term. And you might have more questions about whether actually would I be better off having a nuclear weapon myself. You can look at countries like South Korea, Japan, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the UAE. How many countries around the world that have been happy to pull back from having nuclear weapons up until now may look at what happened to Iran and think to themselves, you know what? What happened to Iran did not happen to North Korea. And what's the difference? North Korea has a nuclear weapon and Iran had not actually developed one. So my concern about what we have just gone through for the 4 months is partly what it's done to the global economy. What it's done to some people in the world's poorest countries is horrifying because of the cost of gas and the cost of fertilizer in terms of real lives. But looking forward, I think there is a grim chance that this has ushered in a period of more nuclear proliferation and therefore less security for the world, even beyond the question of what happens to Iran's nuclear program.